Hello and welcome back to Favorite Things. In the fall of 2022, I was thrilled when I learned that the micro-brand watch company Dan Henry released a new model called the 1975 Skin Diver. And I purchased this 39mm date automatic version. And there are already some great hands-on reviews on YouTube, but I wanted to explore the watch that inspired this particular model, the Omega Admiralty. In 1953, Omega started first adding the name Genève to the dials of some of its dressier watches in celebration of their 30mm caliber, which set records at the Geneva Observatory. By 1967, the name began to be applied to other models that were produced in high numbers, offered at lower prices to target younger buyers, even though these Genève watches used the same high-quality movements as Omega's other lines. By the time the Genève sub-brand ceased production in 1979, it made up about 60% of Omega's sales. Popular Genève models were the Chronostop, Dynamic, and this barrel-shaped model I call the 041. Here's a nice blue-dialed manual winder I picked up last year. One of the most well-known Genève models is the Admiralty, which was introduced first in 1968 and was powered by the same caliber 565 movement as the iconic Seamaster 300. The Admiralty came in two styles, the diver version with rotating diver bezel and the non-diver version with the more prominent crown guards and a robust widening crown. The diver version has a 37mm short-lugged case, a non-clicking bidirectional bezel, and an 18mm lug width supplied on an 1168 Oysterlink bracelet. There are two models for the Admiralty Diver. Reference 166.054 is an automatic with date, and 135.042 is manual wound with no date. There are three colorways: silver dial, blue dial, and burgundy dial, each with matching bezel inserts. The other Admiralty is the non-diver, or what I refer to as the field or adventurer version. It's a 35mm with 17mm lugs, and it has an eccentric case design with the lugs that excessively converge toward the center, accentuating the roundness of the case shape. This seems to be a common theme for Omega, and it can be seen on other models from time to time. I kind of wish Omega would have just kept the case shape a bit more traditional and not pulled the lugs in, which would have easily yielded an 18mm lug width. The 17mm lug width is a challenge since options in that size are a bit limited, but I'll talk more about that later. Most have these long lugs, but the earliest ones from the first year of production in 1968 have short lugs. The longer lugs enhance the wrist presence on the 35mm case, but the short lug version has more possibilities for bracelet fitting, although with the uncommon 17mm lug width, it is still a challenge due to fewer strap and bracelet options. The non-diver Admiralty has more model varieties than the diver. Besides long lug versus short lug, there are two dial designs and at least three dial colors: white, gray, and black. And I have seen photos of a couple examples with blue dials, but I'm not 100% sure they are original. The four model or reference numbers correspond to different movement calibers and functionalities. 135.015 is a manual wound with no date using caliber 601. 136.015 is a manual wound with date using caliber 613. 165.038 is an automatic with no date using caliber 552. And finally, 166.038 is an automatic with date using caliber 565. The non-diver has two dial variants. The first is this military or railroad dial. It has printed numbers and a printed logo. The other dial variant is what I call the index dial, which has applied logo and applied indices with matching orange lines at the hour markers. The minute track is subdivided to indicate 1/5 of a second marks. The Admiralty uses this ghost baton handset, where the base of the hands are painted the same color as the dial field and the hands appear to float. The same hand design was used on the first generation Rolex Explorer 2 1655, which was introduced 3 years after the Admiralty in 1971. It's hard to ignore the possibility that the Explorer 2 borrowed this ghost handset and was influenced by the orange accents and orange seconds hand of the Admiralty, orange 24-hour hand on the Explorer 2. Orange is a very legible color and a great choice for accenting on watches. Now, I'd like to delve a little bit more into the details and quirks of the Admiralty non-diver and share some of my personal experiences and opinions. These non-diver Admiralties came on 17mm Fixoflex expansion bracelets with matching end links specific to either long or short case variants. I personally don't care for these expansion bracelets as they feel a bit flimsy, and removing and replacing the links is challenging when you want to change the bandwidth. The long lug versions require either a flat end link bracelet, a strap, or the original Fixoflex. Customization is certainly possible, but I found that to be much more doable with the short-lugged 1968 versions. I was able to modify various 18mm aftermarket bracelets to nicely fit the 17mm short-lugged case. One of mine came with this 18mm Omega Rivet Oyster bracelet fitted with a pair of 17mm 589 end links. Definitely non-factory, but very well done. It pays homage to the original Fixoflex expansion bracelets, as these rivet links are actually spring-loaded and are expandable. That was a nice surprise, and it's very comfortable. The winding crown is one of the best features. It is nicely framed by bold crown guards, which adds presence to the case shape and gives the illusion of a larger case size than the 35mm that it really is. The original crown is a massive 6.7mm and is commonly replaced by the wrong crown. Unfortunately, the original part has been discontinued, and Omega's official replacement is not quite the same shape. It's slightly deeper and it has fewer notches. The hefty crown is a pleasure to wind, and this is why I sought out a manual wound version. The automatic version winds smoothly enough, but it lacks that spring tension sensation that the manual winder offers. I also like the slimmer case profile of a manual wound, as it shaves off 1.5mm since there's no rotor. The acrylic crystal is available in either plain or a version complete with the underside magnification lens. The part number is 063PZ5128 for the non-date version and 063PZ5127 for the date version. And L at the end of the part number denotes that there's a magnification lens, and in usual Omega fashion, it's an underside cyclops, so it doesn't protrude outward. It also magnifies to a lesser degree than a protruding cyclops. Like all original Omega crystals, there will be a tiny Omega symbol in the center of the crystal, etched from the underside so it doesn't get polished away when you use your polywatch. The date wheel is sometimes white on black, or in the case of mine, black on steel. I prefer the index dial over the railroad dial, especially because of the use of the orange indices at the hour markers. The gray dial version has the same white ghost hands as the black version. I found that the contrast between the faded gray dial and the patinated white hands to be insufficient to read in low light conditions. The white dial version has the reverse ghost hands with a white base and black tips. This white dial version lacked the characteristic orange anchor on the dial. It seemed that the last Admiralty models produced lacked that feature, which I find unfortunate, as it is characteristic of the model. After all, the Admiralty model is often referred to by the Italian name Ancoretta. For me, the black dial is the ultimate in both legibility and style, and I am fortunate to have acquired this nice pair of short-lugged date models, one automatic and one manual. The originality of this design is very attractive, and I have been wishing for Omega to reissue the Admiralty model or something similar. That leads me back to the Dan Henry Skin Diver. The Dan Henry Skin Diver 1975 is a faithful remake of the Admiralty Diver in a more modern size. A 39mm version like this is available with date or no date, as well as automatic or mega quartz. Unfortunately, the automatic movement used is too large to fit the more vintage-sized 37mm version, which is only available in the quartz no-date option. This watch is a combination of the diver and non-diver Admiralty models, as the diver never was available with a black dial, and it resembles the non-diver index dial that I've described previously. Here are my observations. The dial is matte black and crisp, but I wish there was some kind of an orange ship steering wheel or other maritime symbol in place of the anchor, as this little symbol is just characteristic of the Admiralty model. I'm a little disappointed that the hand tips are bare metal instead of painted white like the originals it's inspired by, as they don't stand out as much and are outcompeted by the orange seconds hand. I like the orange color of the date wheel numbers, as it goes nicely with the color scheme, but from a practical standpoint, they are not as legible as black on white or black on steel would have been. I opted for the steel bracelet, which has a great build quality and is reminiscent of the Omega flat link bracelets of that era. I don't care for the high polished center links and was considering brushing the center links, but I'll reveal a secret about this bracelet. The top and bottom sides are symmetrical, so I was able to reverse the bracelet, and I just needed to brush the centers of the end links, and I didn't have to brush the center links at all. They're still there if I want to flip back and have the polished center links. The clasp has a good double push button deployant, but the downside to its compact length is that there's only 2 adjustment holes, and I wasn't able to get the sides just right. The bracelet links use push pins. A future project might be to do a side-by-side comparison of the original Omega Admiralty diver and the smaller 37mm version of the Dan Henry 1975 skin diver. If anybody wants to help me with that project, please let me know. My dream Dan Henry model, and this is a request, would be a 36 or 37mm version of the non-diver, and it be manual wound, please. I wish manual winders were more popular. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.